Yeah, so welcome to everybody listening now and in the future. My name is Kate White, and I'm here tonight with my friend Nisha Gill we're doing a presentation for an Australian cohort or those interested in understanding my foundations course. I have a PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to talk from. I'm going to introduce the course to you and talk a little bit about the 4 days and why it's the foundations and what it is about, and a little about my 6-module training, which I'm hoping to bring to Australia. So I'm just going to get the slideshow going, and I'll talk from there. So what I'd like to do is it's pretty straightforward, talking about the things I'm going to teach and some of the background behind it, and then I'll take questions. So here. Okay. So I can see you all. If you do have questions, and you wanted to ask, you can just raise your hand. But I figure this is pretty straightforward. And can you see one slide or two, Nisha? One? Okay, good. Okay. So this is our orientation. This is what I'm going to do this evening, or actually it's the daytime over there in Australia, so during the day. And so I'm going to just introduce the training model and then why it's important. And I do a lot of talking about birth trauma and how it shows up in families. And so I'm going to I have a few slides on that, even though I do quite a bit of lecturing about it. I try to keep up with the latest research and the data in our country, and I'm sort of familiarizing myself with what happens in Australia. And then I'm going to talk about the 4 days. It's a basis for the 6-module training. So this is my introduction. I am a body worker. I have a background in somatics, and I've been working in maternal and child health for almost 30 years. And I started working as a biodynamic craniosacral therapist in 1999. And while I was doing that, I had a client remember her birth on my table. And I didn't know that was possible. And so from there, I went and studied with just about every teacher I could find. For those of you who have been interested in pre and perinatal work, you get quite smitten by it. And then so I was, and I went and I studied with quite a few instructors in the pre and perinatal work. I have a few of them that I want to honor, and you'll see my lineage. And in the process of becoming a therapist, I have a significant amount of education, including somatic trauma resolution work, and a lot of pre and perinatal somatic work. I met midwife Lois Treesize. I met Lois in 2002, and we started working together in 2003. And I built a healing arts center in Vermont where I met her, and together we started working with families. She and I would do conscious, birthing education, and she would catch the baby and I would catch the family. And it was here working together, and she worked in a hospital there, and that we realized that we had a model of care where women, families could come and they could get good preparation. And then if there was something overwhelming afterwards, we had a way of working with them. And so very slowly over a long period of time, we've developed this model, and we call it integrated pre and perinatal dynamics. It combines midwifery model of care with somatic trauma resolution in pre and perinatal somatics. So over this long period of time working with families, we started to develop a rubric of skills, which I have sent to all of you. And we also began to offer free talks, and then we developed this foundations course. And the foundations course was a way for me to introduce the skills of somatic trauma resolution, because that is our main body of work, as that's the doing necessarily of the work. And so each of the days of the foundations course introduces some of that. And then I also teach pre and perinatal somatics, so I wanted to talk about that tonight especially. So we developed our foundations course. We offered about 10 of them, and then five or six of them, and then we taught our first cohort during COVID. We were supposed to be in person, but we just started developing it online. So we've taught it all online. It can be done online with people. And then we offered our foundations course again 5 or 6 times, and we were able to continue. And now we have a whole new cohort, second cohort. We're halfway through. So this is my lineage. These are the people that I have drawn from for the work that I do. And like I said, I'm a body worker. I started out as a somatic massage therapist, pre and perinatal, and then became a biodynamic craniopsychotherapist and began working in particularly with John and Anna Chitty. They run the Colorado School of Energy Studies, and and Anna's work in particular has had a big impact on me. And then in the somatic experiencing world, these are my teachers and the people I studied with the most. Abby and I have done actually some teaching together now, combining somatic trauma resolution with understanding birth trauma. And so these are the people that influenced me the most. And then in the pre and perinatal place in our space, these are the teachers that have the most influence. I studied with Myrna Martin for 10 years, and then I've known Ray for almost 20 years, and he and I worked together closely before he died. And then Mary Jackson, one of his legacy teachers, as well as Tara Blasco, are both instructors in the advanced family work I do and are now teaching his work. And then, of course, the midwifery aspect with Lois. I've learned an awful lot from Lois. And I think that the people that come to study, there's 2 groups primarily. One are somatic trauma resolution therapists or body workers who want to understand pre and perinatal psychology and the roots of it, but really need to understand what happens at births. And then there's birth professionals who know what happens at births, but really need to understand somatic trauma resolution and the baby's experience. And I find that my classes often have both of those types of professionals, and we come together as a diverse transdisciplinary group. So I'm particularly grateful to Anna and John and Ray. Their work has really informed the work that I offer as part of the training. And Ray's principles always apply. These are things that you'll learn in the training, but he developed them over a long period of time. For those of you that I can see, how many of you know about Ray Castellino's work? Lorly, Alicia. Okay, Ray, over a long period of time, developed his foundations course. And in the foundations course was 8 modules. Now it's 9, and teaches the baby's experience. And what he found was originally he started working with babies, that babies don't come by themselves. They come with their families. So I have incorporated a lot of the things that I've learned over many decades, 2 decades, not many, 2 decades, 24 years of understanding how to work with families. And I learned them primarily from Ray. And these are his principles of understanding that for every family, we teach about them feeling welcome, and that in our group there is mutual support and cooperation where we support each other in our learning. And we have choice always. You can always say no to the things that we are offering. And for each of the modules that I do, and in the foundations course, I offer a taste of the baby's experience. Then we learn a lot about tempo and rhythm. We learn how to slow the pace. And he uses something called the pause, which is something that we offer for families to learn how to slow the pace and listen to each other. And self-care is a major principle of our work also. And we honor that in our student body and in our teaching team. And we really try to help families by offering them the notion that self-care for the adults as well as the children makes for a healthy family. We teach touch and attention, which is one of the line items in our foundations course. I talk about touch, and in fact, I teach 5 different kinds of touch. And brief and frequent eye contact is just one of the ways that Ray found that if he could encourage that in families, it helped create a more coherent feeling, more harmonic feeling in the family. And we keep confident all the stories that come to us, and these are the things that we hold in our training. But also in pre and perinatal work, Myrna Martin, who was one of the students of Ray, offered another principle, which she calls it the principle of magic, but I call it the principle of transformation and synchronicity. And often when we're working with pre and perinatal work, there are things that are in the invisible spaces that come visible. And what I often say to students and to people who come to Womb Surrounds is just to be open to something like that happening for you. One of the pioneers in pre and perinatal work, Wendy M. McCarty, likened pre and perinatal work to seeing something that you've never seen before, and suddenly you can see it everywhere. And if you haven't seen it before, then you don't know what you're seeing. But once you see through the eyes of the lens of pre and perinatal, you see it everywhere. So I like to add that as a principle, that often things that are just beyond our awareness become much more visible in training. This is Anna, and the reason why I talk a lot about her is that she particularly has transformed the pre and perinatal space. She brought what we call the blueprint, which I think came from Randolph Stone, who was really a polarity pioneer. He created the polarity therapy. But the idea that there is this energetic part of us that is constant and there and always at play. It's part of our health and our system. And you'll see, I talk a lot about that. But she brought this idea of the blueprint, which is always in us, around us. And we teach how to track that. And Anna brought that into the pre and perinatal work, and I think really transformed the landscape, made it much better, safer. And one of the things that causes people to really fall in love with pre and perinatal work is that our truest nature, our greatest spiritual essences are right next to these early wounds. And so once you begin to move through them, your own spiritual nature wakes up and you feel it, and we feel it through the body. So Anna brought these things, and I've been studying with her and her husband John before he died, and I particularly use their 5 practitioner skills. Now you all received the rubric that I sent out. We've developed them so that you can see when you're emergent, proficient, and advanced. And these are the things that Anna has brought, and I use them to organize how I teach. So you'll see it in particular as I move through some of these slides, but it's in our training and it's in the foundations course. For those of you who this is your first time getting to know about pre and perinatal somatics, it's a therapy that's developed over a long period of time, and it's known by many things. I think birth trauma, birth psychology, pre and perinatal psychology, primal therapy. There is a pretty long history of understanding that birth and the baby's experience does lay down a template for experiences in our body, and it can last a lifetime. I've been a practitioner of this for 24 years, and it's been fascinating to watch science discover the baby, and then for science to begin to support that that the prenatal period, birth and after birth, do lay down foundational experiences in us, and that more attention now needs to be brought to supporting birthing families, pregnant families, and now what I'm seeing is we need to support our people when they're young to understand their bodies more. And this is in high school and as young as 8. We're trying to bring a much greater awareness of how we care for ourselves, so that, like the latest research I've read has said that when people get pregnant, it's almost too late. So we're now really understanding like there is a holistic sort of continuum of health, and it starts in preconception, and that is what I teach. So we teach about this implicit memory, how it lays down in our bodies, what does it look like and feel like, what is the baby's experience, and how does that show up. I teach in particular using these 5 layers, but Ray developed quite an extensive list, and I incorporate a lot of that into the training. I'll show you his continuum of circles in a second. But pre and perinatal healing employs a somatic pattern language. We teach you to see the baby's experience. We teach you to feel it and understand it in yourself. We see it through posture, through sensation, through movement and gesture, through the metaphors that people use as they speak. It's the quality of your presence that will make a big difference in the families that you work with, and with the adults as well. And one of the biggest tools that we teach is how to feel it in your body. This is a body empathy. So it's a somatic practice. It's not a cognitive practice, but the information is also important, especially in the training that I provide. I'm wanting to train professionals to prevent and heal birth trauma. So there is a lot of the midwifery model of care in our training. It's very technical. And I want you to know what happens at births, because I want you to be able to sit with someone and know what it is when they tell you, I had premature rupture of membranes, I had a precipitous labor, I had 5 days of prodromal labor, I had a posterior labor, I had to have a vacuum assist. I want you to be able to know what these things are, and when you sit with someone, that knowing will be felt. That is one of my intentions. But I also want you to know that I love this, and I do this because I love it. And it is also my intention for you to feel that. So what happens for people with this implicit memory in our body is that the conditions in the present will often trigger or activate the memory. So the therapy becomes understanding when you're with the memory and when you're in the present. And so this is what my friend Mark Brady called the integration imperative. Your history wants to heal. As an organism, you're always moving toward healing. So these are some of the basic principles of the work that I teach. So here are Ray's continuum of circles, and how it is that we come into form from source into ourselves and into our spirit. We are spirit and matter. And our first couple of modules talk a lot about this, that we are living on a continuum of consciousness coming into matter. And I employ the work of Jaap van der Wal, who's a embryosophist and an anatomist, and talks a lot about incarnation, how we are consciousness coming into form, as well as the work of Randolph Stone and John and Anna Chitty. We are here on planet Earth to have an experience. And so Jaap likes to say, we are spirit and matter, and voila, our soul is born. And this is our soul's journey on planet Earth. So I talk a lot about that in our first module in particular. But then we have all these other layers of experience. So we have often we come in with a twin, or we have our own experience prenatally. We have our family and our extended family, and then the culture and society in which we live. And these are all influences upon us. So we talk about how we are shaped. We're shaped by, this is our very early experience, coming into form in utero. We have prenatal experiences. And so I teach those, how to look for those. You have your own experiences from the inside out. But we are shaped. We're shaped like these nesting dolls by our experiences. And again, these are my rings of experience that I teach from. These are those 6 modules in the full training. Each embody a part of these rings of experience. But in the foundations course, I prepare you. The course I'm going to teach when I come to Australia at the end of March, it's a preparation. So I'm going to go over that tonight. But what inspired me were therapists like this man, William Emerson, who is a pioneer in pre and perinatal work. I heard him speak at a cranial conference in 1999, and it was then that my decision was made. And I ordered everything that he recorded and wrote. He is one of our pioneer practitioners. And he said, one day there will be therapists who know embryology, human development, trauma healing, obstetrics and gynecology, verbal skills, touch skills. And that is what I am combining in the work that I'm bringing. Our populations in the perinatal work include couples who want to conceive and pregnant people and their support team. I do a lot of dyadic work. I work a lot with people with their babies, families. Many babies come to me, families bring their babies to me because of challenges with breastfeeding. I also do a lot of work with adults that have early trauma. And the reason why we do this is because our history and our present experiences are connected in our nervous system, and these memories may lie beneath our conscious memory. And these all start when we are babies. So when we're taught, we know now a lot about the baby's experience. When I've been giving lectures for so long that I think that I used to have to convince people. Now I don't have to do that. It's really pretty remarkable. And I would go from classrooms where people would get upset or they'd fall asleep or they'd get up and leave, to now a lot of people just nod their head. And it's been fascinating to watch the journey of accepting the baby's experience, from our transgenerational history, looking at epigenetics, and also understanding now that the pregnancy does leave an imprint, and we understand also early childhood. So this is a quote from David Chamberlain, who's co-founder of the Association of Pre and Perinatal Psychology and Health, that the womb is a schoolroom and every baby attends. So for the 4 days of the Foundations course, when I come to Australia, these are your 4 days, and I'm going to talk about each of these days. Our major themes include creating safety and creating stability and resiliency in the nervous system, recognition of the patterns that can come starting preconception, and how you receive a whole family, how you help them understand their own histories. Often the histories of the parents will show up at births and after births. When we get pregnant, our own early history begins to speak louder. So I have people in recognition of the patterns. We do a lot of deep listening, a lot of listening with our body and listening to the stories of the people as they come and bring their histories. We use all kinds of levels of inquiry, especially open-ended questions. And we do a lot of psychoeducation about the nervous system, the polyvagal theory, and understanding the window of presence, understanding what trauma looks like, the spins of trauma, the vortices, how to create a counter vortex or a healing vortex, depending on whose language you use. Anna Chitty's language of the blueprint and the imprint is what I use, and I'm going to explain that. So just working with some general definitions of trauma, we know that it's in the person, not in the event, and that there's a lot of ways we can describe it. I like to, these are my favorite definitions on the bottom, just from listening to so many lectures and teaching in the over the years. But being pushed beyond our capacity to cope or going through anything without enough support. When it comes to birth trauma, often when I'm receiving a family, especially the birthing parent will often say, I did something wrong, it was my fault, I'm not a good parent, or I failed, or my body, I failed my body, or I did this to my baby, or there's a lot of self-responsibility that many pregnant people will, and birthing people will take on themselves. So our job often is to help them understand what happened. And that's why I want you to understand what happens at births. So I think I only see one person besides Nisha as Laura Lee. How many of you are birthing professionals on this call? Anybody? Can you put up a thumb or a hand? So really helping people understand, yeah, Joe, understand what is birth trauma. And so this is one definition from Penny Simkin. So when the individual, mother, father, or other witness, sometimes in my private practice, I work with nurses who have seen birth trauma to help them with their secondary trauma, believes that the mother's or her baby's life was in danger and that it was a serious threat to the mother's or her baby's physical or emotional integrity. Some statistics here in our country, between 25 and 34% of births report that women report their births were traumatic. I know in Australia it's 1 in 3, so like 35%, 33%. Some studies report that 1 in 4 women who give birth will express some symptoms of PTS. Other studies show that 6% of women develop true PTS, and sometimes I'll read as high as 9%. And many of these women have had their own traumas in their lives, or their own complex trauma or early trauma. So we teach you in your inquiry to, when you receive a family, to talk about that. If you hear patterns for it, often it's insecure attachment and other types of developmental or complex trauma. And this is a newer study. I've put it in our talk tonight simply because of the impact of it. It comes from the Commonwealth Fund. And they have found that that this is tracking the impact of maternal morbidity, which is health conditions and things that happen at births, which are overwhelming. The top one that physically that you all can probably relate to is the hemorrhage. But when the very top one is the maternal mental health conditions, this is now the very top complication in our birth histories, in birth trauma in our country. It has a lot of medical costs, and it can be up to 18 billion when it comes to measuring the actual cost of some of these morbidities. The total they determined was $32 billion. These are all in millions of dollars. So it's like a lot of cost, not only in dollars, but to our relationships and to our families. And maternal mental health conditions can have its basis in birth trauma, as well as some of the conditions that happen before. So pre and perinatal psychology, in terms of its working with postpartum conditions, antenatal conditions, is now very prevalent, and understanding the somatics of it is what I teach in our course. And just a few of the conditions lately from COVID. This comes from Krista Dancy and her analysis of a study that showed how postpartum depression has gone way up because of COVID, from 14% to 31%, and post-traumatic stress has gone from 4% to 30%. A lot of that has been from the isolation and the insecure attachment that's in the histories of the women and the families, actually, their partners as well. And this study is another one that it's a multi-nation study, but you can see how in the red is post-traumatic stress, in the blue is anxiety, and in the orange is depression, and how much that has gone up because of the COVID pandemic. So you can see the real need for it has gone way up. There was a pretty big need for it before the pandemic. And just a few other statistics. Like I have talked a lot about how families feel about their births. When they come in, they often are devastated when they seek my help, or they're horribly anxious. And a lot of the ways that we talk about the impact of trauma, it's not just the use of interventions, it's not just the blood loss and hemorrhaging, it's in the relationships that people have with their caregivers. So a lot of the trauma that when people begin talking about it, it shows up with how they're communicated with or not, or how in control they feel of their births. And these are some of the quotes I picked up from various sources. That women are perceiving their birth experiences as dehumanizing and stripping them of their dignity. They feel invisible and not cared for and not communicated with and not considered. Or like this quote, I was congratulated for how quickly and easily the baby came out, and then he scored a perfect 10. But the worst thing was that nobody acknowledged how I had had a bad time. Everyone was so pleased it had gone so well. I felt as if I'd been raped. So many women do feel this way, and they feel like they are missed. They feel dropped. They feel like people are not listening to them. And I think that that's why we have a big focus on listening in our training. And here are some more considerations along the same line, just about understanding that our birth traumas often are showing up in people because they have had former traumas. And so we have to do a better trauma-informed care model of really listening to what has happened for families before they come in for their birth, or even before they come in your office. So the job that I prepare you for is to search, repair, and restore. It's a restorative model. It's helping to restore the people who come to themselves and to each other, so that family can come and feel restored and then walk out and thrive. And I've seen our model really turn something around in just one session. We have to have a follow-ups, but I've really seen women just feel so much better, especially by just affirming how challenging it was and it has been. So returning to our map, your first day is on stabilization, and we focus on creating a safe space through quality of presence. And we do that by just orienting first to what helps, what's resourcing, where is it in our relationship with ourselves, or with our daily life, or with our people that help us feel more secure and happier. And so we help by bringing a feeling of stabilization. Of course, for those of you who work with trauma, know that's the very first thing we often do. By helping somebody feel more stable, connected, more whole, more supported, ease, warmth, more open, soothed, grounded. And we have skills of orienting using sensation and those 5 practitioner skills. I'm helping people orient to what happens in their body, helping them understand the states that show up in their body, and then we practice. So we work with the felt sense. We deepen into something good. So we start with stability and resourcing. So what was good today? What was good? What helps? What has helped? And in the birth stories, I worked with women. Sometimes it's that one nurse or that anesthesiologist who got it, or my doctor or my midwife. Sometimes none of those people. Sometimes it's, it can be something so simple as, the quality of a blanket, or finally when I got home, that was when I felt better. I mean, really helping them find those moments in their experience that helped. And you explore that with curiosity. And you ask, what happened in your body when you remember that? Working with sensation. So here is an example. Well, we deepen into this resource. I choose a moment in a memory and put yourself there. And what sensation makes it most alive for you? And where is it in your body? And we deepen into that memory. It's a memory of something good. And that is one of the ways that we begin to create that, that counter vortex, or that healing space where we can go and then be with something more challenging. So this is just one of the skills of that on that first day. I have quite a few skills that we teach you. And a lot of it is this feeling present in your body, ways to feel more present, and connected. And then finding that right boundary. If you need a boundaries, you can feeling into just the right amount of space when you are with someone. And we practice. And then we deepen into something good. On the second day, we work with identifying what are blueprint and imprint, and understanding activation. So many people who come to the training already know about what activation is. And so we help them both understand the nature of what we call the blueprint, which I'm about to show you, but also understanding the field and field dynamics. What makes pre and perinatal work different than a lot of other therapies is just understanding the energetics of who we are. So we talk about the feeling of energy in our body and how there is a movement. It will move slowly in our body. And it's always there. It's underneath anything that happens to us. It's connected to the health in our system. It's not just the heart, it's the whole body. And so we teach how to track the space in between us, as well as what's happening in our body, as well as what's happening in the family that comes. So we start with understanding the field, and how we do that through the felt sense, through feeling coherency. So when we're trying to give you tools to understand, like, how do you feel the field? How do you feel what's happening in another? We work with coherency, like the flow of something, the ease, the unification of it, the diversity of it, but how they all work together. Often a lot of us live a very cohesive life. We're holding ourselves together and we embrace. A lot of us have a trauma brace. So we bring attention to it. So really working to build up a sense of coherency and understanding where we have flow and when we have blocks. So we work with positive states. The images I'm using are from heart math, but they're very similar to understanding our own inner energetics. So we work with the positive states first, deepening into something that helps. And then we begin to understand that it's how we feel in our body. It's not just what we do that matters, but how you feel on the inside. So the quality of your presence, remembering your own health, that we have made it, and that often many of us are living in memories. Now, for those of us who work as therapists, understand all the layers that can happen, layers of complexity in the lives of everybody, adult, teenage, and early childhood. What I teach and what is in part of the training is just the baby's experience. And how does that show up? So we teach a lot about feeling this quality of presence and knowing that you are here now. Many of us get caught up in a memory and we think that that memory is us. So we really teach a lot of differentiation, being able to really refine that feeling of knowing when we are present. Anna Chitty says presence plus anything equals transformation. And the quality of your presence with someone will make all the difference. So we begin by just focusing on, again, that resource and the feeling of the blueprint inside of us. So the quality of appreciation or gratitude that we have, but there is a way to track it using sensation. It's a slower pace, it's warm. There's often a flow, there's often a feeling of expansion and then gathering, expansion and then gathering. There's a balance to it. And you can feel it. Often it's slow and purposeful, and you can come to the edge of it, or you can deepen into it. So this is Anna Chitty's definition of the blueprint. It's invisible, universal template that guides all formation. It is inherent and underlying everything. It is a part of our original design. It's a template for connection, and it has a felt sense of, like I say, expansion and then gathering, but it can also rise and fall. It can also spiral up and then in or out. And we track this using sensation. And we also know that when there are two or more of us, a third field arises. And so we teach how to feel into that and how to read the space and feel the space in between people. So in the imprint is how often we talk about the baby's experience, these early times that are very challenging. When people approach me and they say, I want to understand the baby's experience. I want to be a therapist of the pre and perinatal work. I say, okay, then how are you with survival states? Some of the biggest, most terrifying survival states that I have encountered have been with understanding the baby's experience. And so people have sometimes this idea about it, but it can be quite challenging to be with. So that's why I want, for those of you who want to study, to come to the Foundations course, so you can get a sense of whether or not you really want to study this. These impressions that we are carrying sometimes are not all ours. They belong to our family. And Lois and I have encountered that in our families, especially if there's been what we call a maternity ghost. If there's been a demise or some kind of tragedy in the family line, that will often show up at births. It may not haunt us at any other time, but if there's been a maternity ghost, that sometimes it will repeat. And there are also echoes of our own early history will show up at births. So this is why we teach this. And they can be from our parents or from our ancestors, and they have not been metabolized by our parents or their parents. And so they show up in us. And I can't tell you how often I see it now when people are coming, they're bringing also their ancestors. And so really being able to thresh and be able to differentiate how much of this is me and how much of this is my mother's postpartum depression or my ancestors' suffering. And when someone can really get it, that they can differentiate from that, it's like this huge burden has been lifted. And there's lots of examples of that. So what we teach is ways to recognize when there is one of these early implicit traumas at play, and how we can develop that counter vortex, the quality of presence and the things that you are encountering. And when we're working with birth trauma, it's not just working with our own early trauma, the early traumas of the people are ahead of you. You're there, front and center, front row seat to that threshold moment of when people become families. And you can alleviate that in someone right away. They don't have to grow up to be in their 50s and suffering, or even in their 20s and suffering. You can make a difference right away, which is why I love teaching this. Because you can understand it in yourselves. One of our little sayings in the online school is come, study, learn, heal. You can learn about yourself, but you can learn about what happens at births, and you can help the parents, and you can help that baby. And you can create then this healing space right at this vital moment in human development. So this is our second day. I introduce these concepts to you. And I lay out some of our maps of experience. So we always teach the health first. That's the blueprint, what helps. And that it's always there inside of you and inside of the family that's coming. But then there are these shock trauma. Now, shock trauma can be these things that a sudden losses, domestic violence, this earthquake in Turkey. It's devastating. And the wars in Ukraine. These are shocks and devastating. At births, they can be overwhelming acts that you have, like there has to be an intervention that was a surprise. And that shocks do show up. Really fast births, long births, lots of compression. Sometimes medications will create shock. And then there's developmental trauma. These are things that happen in our childhoods and over periods of time, things that maybe we inherit from our family line. We teach those things too. And as you saw in some of the research, it very much impacts how people feel and at births, especially if they feel abandoned or dropped during this vital time. And that is why I think that there's such room for this professional who can come in and track families. And when I've given lectures to audiences, they often ask me, well, what is your plan to change the system? And what I say is, well, right now what I'm doing is I'm building a little house next to the hospitals that has smoke coming out of the chimney and a sign on the front that says healing happens here. So families come there, they go in and have their baby, and if they need be, they come out through your healing hut right next to the hospital. Many of the things that I have to say to families, I'm not sure would be said in hospitals. Like, I'm sorry. That was overwhelming. Yes, that was hard. And I'm sorry. So those are the things that we talk about with families. But then I teach deeper things. I teach the essence or mystery of that blueprint. There's often something quintessential that's lying just beneath these early wounds. So I teach how to bring those out by just simple facilitation using somatics. These are the things that Anna Chitty has taught me about how to broaden and deepen until what was overwhelming suddenly integrates. And then this human beauty rises. And you'll see it in these new families. There's no place I know where it is more potent. The love, the compassion, the connection. And you can help that. And then beneath that are these really sort of mystical other places of our elemental nature, yin, yang, neutral, and the embryo. I teach the embryo. I teach the threshold moments of the embryo. That's in our module 2. But I start you out by understanding this map. Trauma disconnects us, and it connects us from ourselves, from others, from the system, from the field. And pre and perinatals are the first place that we are to embody. So I teach you to attend to that. But working with birth trauma is not like other traumas. At least that's my experience. It's a lot like playing 3-dimensional chess. If any of you have ever played that. You have 3 boards, and something can come in from above, and something can come up from the middle, or down, up and down, up and down. You're tracking this 3-dimensional, sometimes 4-dimensional space. So I give you the eyes to see that and feel that in your body. And you are in the space as well. Like I often use this image as a teaching tool. We're resonant. It's a resonant science. So you're tracking the birthing parent, the baby, the father, the other parent, the space, and yourself. On day 3, I teach touch skills. There are 5 touch skills. I go through the birth sequence as a pattern, and then you get a chance to have your own mini experience. So on this day, our first morning, I teach about touch. I've been doing this online, so I'm looking forward to actually doing it in person. So I teach about touch, and then we start with just understanding the layers of our experience in our bodies. Then I teach these types of touch, negotiated touch, which is asking permission about touch, and finding what I call a sweet spot, just the right amount of pressure. I use deep, still touch to stabilize. I'd like to teach you the whole bodywork sequence that I've created through doing the work. Stabilizing touch is deep and still, but using, again, the principle of the sweet spot. Moving touch often are just little squeezes. Light touch is still, it can be just holding the brainstem, or if you have cranial touch, that's ideal. Tidal touch is a deliberate type of little squeeze that I use a lot after births, and I teach it to parents. Little squeezes. And it will create oxytocin. It will help move shock. And then I have a kind of a touch I call coherency touch that I've learned from Peter Levine's near-death work. And I find it follows the biorhythm. It follows the breath. And I teach all of these types of touch when working with birth and birth trauma. And then we'd go through just a brief lecture on the baby's experience of birth. And so our model was an inside-out model. So you can feel what the babies feel from the inside out. And so here we're looking at understanding the birth from the baby's experience in a sequence. And I have a whole lecture that I give on that. And then what I teach particularly in the foundations course is the welcome. And understanding that we slow the pace, and that we are working with your own intention for what it is you want for yourself. And I teach you about naming that intention. And in the after, we really allow the slowing down and being with you after you've had your mini experience. It's just a flexion, extension. And we focus on the surround, on creating our harmonic feeling around you. I feel like this is where a lot of the repair is done for birth. And no matter what happens, if you are well received, if you have that sensitive caregiving, this is what we seek to embody in our work. This is why we do the womb surround work or the birth process work of Ray Castellino. This is what he trains people in. This is what his work is, really understanding how to create that harmonic resonance around families. So I teach small elements of that, and one of them is really the welcome. And using that sort of slow pace, quiet, intentional touch, little squeezes, welcoming you. We are so glad that you're here. My mentor, John Chitty, used to say, welcome to planet Earth. We are here for you. And that was hard, and you did it. And just take your time. You don't have to rush or push anymore. And we are right here. We're here for you, and you are not alone. So we rest with you and give you a chance to feel this is one small way for you to experience the baby's experience in the Foundations course. For every module I teach, there is a baby's experience that you will go through. So in day 4 is integration support. And here we introduce differentiation. We bring a little more tone so that you can begin to feel like more present, but also differentiate from your history. Integration is thoughts, feelings, and sensations. We do a lot of reflection with you so you can get a sense of what you've learned up to that point. And then really taking a moment to understand how to make a shift. And here, I like to teach, again, that differentiation. That was then, this is now. And then tracking when you're in a memory and when you're present. Now, this is the work of Ray Castellino, the leading edge. Tracking the leading edge is a way to learn how to be with our implicit somatic trauma memories and have access to present time. That is where a lot of repatterning work can be done. And so I like to teach the leading edge work here, how to differentiate, stay present, come to something more challenging, and back. And this is what I call the basic. This is your skill for our work in the 6 modules and helping transform birth trauma, finding ways to help people feel more present, and then being with the challenge. Sometimes it's naming and affirming that it was challenging and helping people notice it in their bodies with consciousness. So I have a whole lot I teach, but if there's ways to, if you've already learned, so many people have, how to shift a state, but that's the basic work. It's understanding state and state change for the autonomic nervous system. So we're working with the memory. When people come for birth trauma, it's a pretty fresh memory. So often it's an affirmation of the challenge and restoring that person to themselves. That is really what heals, I find, a lot of families. But then these early other traumas may rise, and you will know what to do by understanding state and state change when someone is having a memory. And you just have to know where on the map is the memory, where in their territory are you? And that is part of the art of learning trauma resolution skills. So we learn to work with memory and integration of anything that's challenging. And our final thing that we do is understanding the layers of support and what that feels like in our body. So we have a saying in the pre and perinatal work that every baby deserves 2 layers of support. And here is a poster series I had made a long time ago, and you can see it's become one of my logos. But for the embryo, has the amnion and the chorion. And for the baby on the inside, baby has their 2 parents. And for the newborn family, they have professionals and extended family to help. Everybody deserves 2 layers of support. So this foundation course is the entry-level course to the integrated pre and perinatal dynamic training. These are the 6 modules. They are addressing each of the layers of challenge within for a birthing family. I teach from my many years of studying pre and perinatal somatics, but I also teach the midwifery model of care. And there is quite a few technical things to know, because I have found that the families get very relieved when you could look at them and feel, yes, that was a challenge. And yes, that was overwhelming. And I today am going to make a repair with you for that. So this is the nature of my work. It has, again, those 3 approaches: pre and perinatal somatics, somatic trauma resolution skills, and midwifery. I integrate a lot of trauma-informed and trauma skills into the course. I also teach relational dynamics and understanding the field, understanding pre and perinatal work from that holistic sort of 3 to 4 dimensional perspective. So it's a new model of care. It starts preconception. It includes the baby's experience. Baby and birth trauma is addressed immediately. Trauma resolution in adults includes birth, bonding, and attachment, and we address the baby within. Our job, again, is search, repair, and restore. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to stop here and take any questions. Yes, I do. I teach the foundations course in the US, Amber. I teach our next, we have 2 that are coming. One in New York City. I'm being hosted there by the Still Point Cranial School. And then our next online series will start in 2024. And we'll start with foundations course, and then we'll build into our 6 modules. How do you handle trauma that shows up during training? And do you recommend therapists work on themselves? Oh, yes. I have a teaching team, and you will get a homework buddy, a teaching team member that's been through the training and who will be there for you. And I also recommend trainees get their own pre and perinatal person. I have a lot of colleagues I recommend. I have supervision groups where you can come and talk about what comes up for you as countertransference or transference. And so we do try to create an opportunity for you to encounter yourself and understand that what comes up in the training is information for you to go deeper in your own therapy. Okay. Sophia, did you put your hand up at 8:31? Did you have a question, Sophia?
No, that was just to say that I was a birth worker too.
Oh, okay. What kind of birth work? Are you a doula?
So yeah, postpartum doula through Innate Traditions.
Oh, yes. I think I've met you before.
Yeah, we've had a call before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's Rochelle's work. Okay. Any other questions for me? Laura Lee?
Hi, Kate. Unfortunately, I'm going to be in the US when you're here in Australia doing the training. So I'm very sad that I'll miss it. But when will you be in New York City doing the training? Do you have a date for that?
July 20th to 23rd is the foundations course in New York City.
Okay. I might be able to make that one.
Are you going to be in New York City?
I am.
Wow.
I'm from New York, and I will be in the area in July. So I'll have a look at my schedule and see.
Well, get in touch with the Still Point Cranial School. That's Clara Favalli and Shannon Daly. They've invited
Okay,
me to
thank you.
teach there. Yeah. Anybody else have a question about the foundations course or any of the things I've said tonight or today?
Yeah, when's the earliest you can sign up for the foundations course for 2024?
I guess we'll open up registration for that in the fall. Our last online course is in November. So I guess sometime that October, November, we'll set dates for our foundations courses we'd like to start them in late January. We'll tend to do, several of those to build up a cohort of people interested in the actual training. So if you're on my mailing list, you should get an announcement, Sophia. Yeah. Yeah. Anything else? Okay, well, thank you for coming and listening, and please send questions if you have any after, and I hope to see you in our classroom soon.
Thank you so much.
Kate.
Have a good rest of your day.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Talk to you later, Joe.
Yeah, we'll do. Thank you.
Okay.
See ya.